Would everyone like to come a little further forward? Hello and welcome everyone to a ceremony of farewell for Kathleen Margaret Braithwaite, a much loved lady who has died aged 93 years. My name is Shaun Foulds, and as a celebrant of Humanist UK, I have been asked by her family to conduct a non-religious funeral service for Kathleen, as this will be in keeping with her philosophy in life. A humanist funeral is an opportunity for you all to join in taking leave of someone that you have known and cared about. But it is more than that. It is a celebration of the life and personality that has been. After the ceremony, you are invited to the Craven Heifer for refreshments, where you can share more of your precious memories of Kathleen. It is natural for everyone here to feel deeply saddened. The comfort of having Kathleen in your lives is lost, but the comfort of having had her as an important part of your world can never ever be lost. To match the grief of losing her, you have all experienced the joy of knowing her, a joy that you will be particularly aware of right now, as you fix her living image in your minds, recall the things that she said and did, and the many personal qualities that have made her unique. It is the uniqueness of each human life that is the basis of grief in bereavement. There is no one like the one you have lost. There certainly is no one else in this world quite like Kathleen. But she will live on in your hearts and in your memories. And although no longer a visible part of your lives, she will always be part of your family or circle of friends through the influence she has had on each and every one of you. Kathleen Margaret was the third child of Sydney and Elizabeth Mabb. Kathleen, Kate, to her husband Donald, had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. Her sisters Margaret and Audrey survive her. Audrey is here at Kathleen's funeral with her daughter Christine. Margaret lives in Canada, so she cannot attend, but hopefully will be able to watch by recording. Kathleen was born in Leeds on the 27th of January 1928. She grew up in the Meanwood area along with her 2 brothers, the late Derek and the late Kenneth, and her sisters who included the late Barbara. She attended the local school, but life changed considerably when she was 11 years of age. The war years came, and that led to her being evacuated for her safety in late 1939 to Laverton near Kirby Malzard. Although at first the whole family except Derek and their father were evacuated, only Kenneth, Kathleen and Margaret stayed for a significant period of time. The 2 sisters in a tiny estate cottage with John Metcalfe and his wife. Kathleen attended secondary school there in Ripon. A real bonus for Kathleen was that Dorothy, her best friend from school in Leeds, was also evacuated to Laverton. They remained close friends until Dorothy's death. Kathleen retained many happy memories of her time in Laverton, and in later years she visited the Metcalfes with her own family until the couple died. When she left school, Kathleen returned to her home and family in Leeds, where she continued to live for the rest of her life. Kathleen declined the teacher training which her parents favoured for her future career, opting instead for Pitman's secretarial training. It was while working as a secretary at Crompton Parkinson that she met Donald Braithwaite. The young couple got on together well and started courting. Donald proposed on Otley-Shevin but was turned down as Kathleen said that after 6 months she simply didn't know him well enough. However, she relented and they were married on the 16th of September 1950. Their first home was a rented back-to-back, which they were very lucky to get, as homes were in short supply after the war. They were given priority for that property as one of Donald's cousins was at the time an estate agent. Their happiness was made complete by the births of their children, Anne in 1953 and Andrew, known as Andy, in 1955. Having worked really hard and saved, Kathleen and Donald bought a home in Armley when the children were small. Kathleen didn't work as she wanted to focus on the children, although she did do the odd Sunday shift at William Hill to raise a bit of extra money. Both parents, but Kathleen in particular, were very focused on Andy and Anne having the best education possible. Family leisure time was spent mostly walking in any part of Yorkshire that could be reached by train, bus or trolleybus. Holidays were sometimes in rented cottages years before that became popular, or in the main on walk-in youth hostel in holidays. The miles they covered were many. Their trips covered a range of areas, including some remote spots in Scotland and Ireland, which were only accessible by foot. Kathleen returned to her work in the mid-60s. Her first fully established role was as a school secretary at Upper Wortley and Christchurch primary schools, and then full-time at Upper Wortley. Her final post until retirement was as an executive school secretary at Benjamin Gott Comprehensive School, which was a tough school where those pupils sometimes called for some stern handling. But as one of her neighbours said in a note after her death, Kathleen could sometimes be a bit feisty. Kathleen was very much the right-hand woman of the head, Graham Stanley, and she enjoyed the challenges of the job. It was a role that called on her impressive organisation skills. Anne and Andy went off to university and then moved on to take their own paths in life. At that point, Donald and Kathleen were still enjoying walking regularly, having holidays all over the UK in cottages and B&Bs, and were happy simply being together. Aside from seeing family, they were a very self-sufficient couple socially. Kathleen was overjoyed when Anne's son Guy was born in 1978, his arrival starting a whole new chapter in her life. And when he was older, he often spent time with them on days out in the summer holidays. Kathleen and Donald enjoyed some years of retirement together until Donald's death in 1997. After that, Kathleen dusted herself down, gritted her teeth and got on with reinventing life for herself. She volunteered with the Yorkshire Archaeology Society, where she loved transcribing the ancient archives. She worked with children with literacy issues, joined a walking group and volunteered at St James's Hospital. Through this she met a circle of close friends, and in particular Marjorie, to whom she became very close. Marjorie and Kathleen joined Anne and her husband on several trips to France and Spain. They could and did talk continuously from Leeds train station all the way by rail to their final destination, many miles and hours away. They loved to visit local market towns every week, both to shop and to enjoy pub lunches. At home she still enjoyed cooking, and she was a star baker. Kathleen also moved the year following Donald's death to her home in Talbot Road in Moortown. She settled well and she loved her home and garden, content to spend the remainder of her life there. Kathleen was fiercely independent and always curious. She loved to read and she loved to listen to the radio, her ideas always evolving over the years. She was always keen to learn new skills too, from swimming when Andy was young, through A-levels when Anne and Andy were older, to BBC computing courses in her 70s. Walking remained an abiding passion for Kathleen. She still walked with a group into her 80s. In fact, that was her late 80s. She managed to combine her love for walking with her love of clothes, owning a huge range of high-end walking gear towards the end of her life. Kathleen was also stoic, bearing gracefully the twin burdens of deafness and macular degeneration. The last meant that reading had to shift to audiobooks, and the former that she drove the world mad by her increasing refusal to engage with her increasingly sophisticated hearing aids. Being severely vision impaired, however, did not prevent Kathleen from going out and about. It was the first lockdown that stopped her trips into Leeds to Sassoons and to the market for her fruit and vegetables, even though to get there she had to flag down each passing bus to ask the driver where it was that he was going. Kathleen also looked forward to her Wednesdays out with Audrey. Lockdown hastened a decline in Kathleen as she became less mobile, confined to home and more isolated. She was blessed in her neighbour Ton Hennigan, who looked after her in many ways beyond doing her shopping. He was a mainstay in enabling her to remain in her beloved home, as were latterly, after a fall in April this year, the carers who called in to assist her twice every day. That was also when Kathleen gave up the cooking that she loved. She was still at home and happy to gaze at her garden, thinking and increasingly recalling the past. And she was content with the simple pleasures, such as a good ginger biscuit or a nice glass of wine. Kathleen died during the night of the 27th of July, typically without any warning that she was going to die. She went peacefully and without fuss. She will be deeply missed, and she will always be remembered with affection, admiration and love. I would now like to invite Guy to share some of his thoughts and memories of his grandmother.
I'd like to start by saying thanks to all of you who are with us today, those who are here in person and anyone watching online. And thanks as well to Dawn for leading the committal. I know we each had our own relationships with and memories of Kathleen or Mum or Grandma. And I can't speak to yours, so I'd like to take a moment to speak to mine. It might sound silly, but even though she was 93, I didn't expect to be doing this quite yet. She didn't like getting old and often told me not to do it, but even so, Grandma gave every impression of having no intention whatsoever of going anywhere anytime soon. She could be fiercely determined if she set her mind to something. When my granddad passed away, she decided she wasn't going to stay still. She learned basic computing. She volunteered at the Yorkshire Genealogical Society and Robert Ogden and joined a walking group, and she made damn sure to get herself back out there. Ultimately, she stayed very much herself and in her own home right to the end. I know she'd have wanted it like that, and I'm glad that she did. In later years, I'd sometimes run into her in town when she was wandering around. We'd go for a coffee and sit and natter. It was nice. When I went round to her house, we'd sit and talk for hours about everything and nothing. There always turned out to be about 50 things she needed help with, which had just happened to occur to her. But it always came back to chatting, looking out over her garden, and she loved that garden. and the birds that came to it. She'd always try to insist on making me sandwiches too. It was a minor victory if I negotiated her down to just half an apple tree. Sandwiches made with her bread were a lovely thing though. She was a great baker, and sitting as a child in the kitchen at Thornton Gardens watching her make breads, jams, cakes, it was like watching magic. On rare occasions I was allowed to help, which turned out to be just licking the spoon. My strongest memories of my grandma are from when I was much younger than I am today, from the many days in school holidays and before starting school that I spent with her and my granddad. And that went from running up and down the halls outside her office at Bengott School or being made to look up words I didn't know in the dictionary, no matter how much I sulked about it at the time. But most of all, being taken all over the moors and dales and being made to walk distances which at the time felt like they couldn't have been healthy for a small child. Wherever we went, there was always a hard-boiled egg in a basket in the boot, and sandwiches made with my grandma's bread, and a primer stove, a battered kettle and a teapot. For my grandma, the tea was the important thing. Wherever she was, it would be fine if she could make a proper cup of tea. And I think that's how I'd like to remember my grandma, in a churchyard in hills like this, perched over a whistling kettle on an old camping stove, forcing a hard-boiled egg on me whether I wanted it or not. So, whatever comes next, wherever you are, rest easy, Grandma. I'll miss you.
Thank you, Guy. And to complete our tributes to Kathleen, Anne would now like to speak about her special memories and thoughts of her mother.
Hi. Beautiful as it is here, and I hope you like the spot that's been chosen for you with the cots behind and the grand view of Emsey Crack, which I think you'd approve of, as Guy said. Then Mum really wanted to be buried, really wanted to be buried in the Woodland Cemetery at Lawnswood with Donald, our dad and granddad. She often went and visited him there. They didn't allow such things at Lawnswood, but Mum smuggled in gorilla bulbs and planted them on Dad's graveside. And I'm glad that she never knew that she wasn't going to be able to join him there. So partly it's not the same thing at all, but as a link, then I've chosen to read the same poem that I read at my dad's funeral in 1997. And it's not just that, but the poem resonates with things that Guy's mentioned and were in Dawn's address about Mum. She loved the outdoors, she loved nature, she loved plants, animals, birds, and particularly birdsong. And I remember when she first got her really sophisticated hearing aids, when she would still wear such things, and she could hear birdsong for the first time in a very long time, and it was, she told me, what a wonder that was to her, being able to hear the birds again. So she loved the outdoors, and I hope that her sister Audrey is here today with my cousins Christine and Michael, but her sister Margaret and her husband Glyn are hopefully watching this funeral by live stream in Canada. And I believe that they're at the lake cottage that they have, where Mum spent several happy times. And Mum often talked to me about there, and in particular the wildlife. She loved the loons and the beavers there. And above all for my mum was her beloved garden. That was her outside, and latterly it was her only outside. She was still walking into her late 80s, but that came to an end. She was walking with the macular group, and I often used to wonder. It seemed to me a case of the blind literally leading the blind, but she enjoyed it still. But the garden she loved, and my happiest recent memories of her are this summer sitting with her out in the sun on the bench in her garden, or sitting with her as she gazed out at the garden through the French windows, always looking for the birds that were there, and always looking and noting what plants were out. And she enjoyed, there was a fantastic display of the pasque flowers earlier this year. She always nattered, I don't know why, about whether the clematis in particular was going to flower. She had so many different varieties of clematis, and they also always flowered in great profusion, but she always worried her that they weren't going to somehow. And one sadness and many sadnesses is that she never got to see the blue agapanthus, which have been glorious this year and flowered just after she died. So Mum had created her own world there, her own peaceful oasis with that garden. And that, I think, is echoed by much which is in the poem which I'm going to read. And it's The Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, and a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. Their midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always, night and day, I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavements grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core. And so, Mum, you will be here a long way from home, but I brought with me, and I will give it to you when the time comes, some soil, some earth from your garden, so that always you will have a piece of home with you in this beautiful place. And good night, little Mum, and sleep tight.
Thank you, Anne. Please remain silent for a short time now to reflect on your love for Kathleen and all that she has meant to you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Family and friends, we have now reached a stage in our ceremony of farewell where we must say our official farewell to Kathleen. We come to the committal. A loved one is a treasure of the heart. And to lose a loved one is like losing a piece of yourself. But the love that Kathleen brought you did not leave, for the essence of all that she was still lingers. Cling to the memories and let them find a way to heal you. The love and laughter, the joy that you have shared will make you strong. Keep your heart beating with your loving memories, and know that, though life moves on, the beauty stays behind to surround and embrace you. Kathleen has left you that, to hold in your heart forever. With love and respect, we have remembered the life and values of Kathleen, and we have recalled the unique and very special person she has been. Her hopes and ideals we commit to our minds. Her love we commit to our hearts. Here, in this final act, in sorrow but without fear, and with love and appreciation, we commit the body of Kathleen to its natural end, to the earth which has sustained and nourished her throughout her years, and which regenerates all life. Kathleen will be part of this natural place for all time. Through the warmth of the summer, the mists of every autumn, through the coolness of the winters, and the freshness of each and every spring. As the seasons come and go, may you find comfort when you come here to Kathleen's final resting place, a natural place of peace where you can reflect and remember her. No person is ever truly alone. For those who live no more, who we have loved, echo still within our thoughts, our words and our hearts. And what they did and who they were become a part of all that we are, always. Please take the time that you need to say your own personal goodbyes to Kathleen.
Can't get the top off, so cotton buds off and one's the other part.
Does anyone wish to place any dirt from here?
I'll leave you to have a few moments, Anne.
Bye, Mum. Oh, there's no collection. Sorry, I thought you said catering. No, there's no collection. If you want to give an